Chapter 2. Here is Christie's great idea. Christie Malry, after a long day largely spent feeding pieces of paper into various machines, is making his way home from Tapper's office and contemplating the sublime symmetry of double entry the while. For the following passage, it seems to me necessary to attempt transcursion into Christie's mind, an illusion of transcursion, that is, of course, since you know only too well in whose mind it all really takes place. Who made me walk this way? Who decided I should not be walking 7 feet farther that side, or 3 points west of nor-northeast, to use the marine abbreviation? Anyone? No one? Someone must have decided. It was a conscious decision as well. That is, they said, he said, she said, I will build here. But I think whoever it was did not also add, so Christie Malry shall not walk here, but shall walk there, if he chooses. And there I have him, her, them, if I choose so. But my choice is limited by them, collectively, to a certain extent. I shall list my choices. I may choose to walk for some 40 feet along this particular stretch of pavement, at a width of approximately 8 feet. On one side, my freedom is limited by my desire not to be hit by traffic. On the other, by whoever built this, no doubt, speculative office block. The first limitation I accept, forced on me reasonably enough by society. The other I do not accept. Who can I blame? The person who took this decision, which clearly does me no good, is probably no longer alive. But his successors, heirs, executors, administrators, personal representatives, and assigns certainly are, or they would not be here, in business. They are not averse to taking responsibility for all the money they, he, she left them, so they may conveniently take responsibility for standing this building in my way too, limiting my freedom of movement, dictating to me where I may or may not walk in this street. I could express it in double-entry terms: debit receiver, credit giver, the second golden rule. Debit Christie Malry for the offence received, credit office block for the offence given. How settle that account? I am entitled to exact payment, of course. Every debit must have its credit, the first golden rule. But payment in what form? Christie turned and walked back against the flow of the crowd, past the office block again. He stopped and took a coin from his pocket, and, keeping close to the wall whilst holding the coin down at arm's length, he scratched an unsightly line about a yard long into the blackened Portland stone facing of the office block. Debit them, credit me. Account settled. Christie walked on as though nothing had happened. No one had noticed. No one had. But Christie almost shouted aloud at his discovery. It's a great idea! Eureka! My very own double entry. Chapter 3. Ave Atque Vale to Christie's mother. Christie lived with his mother at this point, near Hammersmith Bridge, in the stump of Mall Road left after the flyover and associated highway improvements. When he arrived home on this day, time now being more or less continuous, his mother rose and welcomed him. Then she delivered herself of a statement, thus: My son, I have for the purposes of this novel been your mother for the past 18 years and 5 months to the day, if I assume your conception to have taken place after midnight. Now that you have had your great idea and are set upon your life's work, there is nothing further for me to do. Christie's mother paused, then continued. I do not complain. I have every reason to be satisfied with what I have done. I have cared for you without cosseting, cooked sensibly for you without running risks from whatever disease was fashionably connected with food at each of several times. Those parts of my body under taboos ruling over the last quarter of a century have not been exposed to you, since at latest the age of 3. I have, husbandless, brought you up not to miss a father, without damaging what they would call your normality. I flatter myself that you are yourself, that you are both more and less than what I have made you, if that means anything. Nor have I let your character be moulded by such other men as I have allowed, for I am not a wooden block, to cross my path and enter in at the shrine of my womanhood. The rather fanciful conceit is used to spare your blushes, Christie, for sons in general have to be over 30 before they can talk without embarrassment to their mothers about sexual matters, or anything else, I have sometimes, in moments of cynicism, thought. Again the charming old lady paused, reflected, and went on. I even allowed you to keep a pet, a cat, in order to encourage some kind of loving in you, despite the fact that Austin inevitably meant more work for me in skinning and braising the mice and other small creatures he regularly brought in. Fortunately for you, Austin passed over 4 months before the occasion of the statement I am at present making, so you were thus spared, Christie, the expense of having him put to sleep at the veterinary surgery. But how I laughed when you first lisped, I do love pussy. And the old lady permitted a sudden smile to illuminate her smooth-lined face. Christie smiled too, as his mother resumed, We have not always lived here. It is important for them to bear that in mind, Christie, if they are to understand. Not that I necessarily want them to understand, but it is clearly desirable that you should have the choice of allowing them to understand if you so wish. No, we have lived elsewhere. We have lived, when you were between the ages of 6 and 9, on the outskirts of a small town, in a house with a railway line at the bottom of the garden. There were only 2 trains a day, and indeed they were really the same one, to the jam factory, there and back on the single track. But I break into rhyme. The old lady showed signs of annoyance, and playfully slapped the back of one hand with the other before going on. You soon learnt to place pennies on the track, and observe how the loaded trains would flatten them more than the returning ones. Oh, we had pennies, and to spare then. And a hole in the fence too, onto the railway property. What days they were! In no time at all you were experimenting with pieces of broken milk bottle on the rail to perfect a very cheap manufacturing process for powdered glass. How proud I was of you when you showed such remarkable precocity in using pieces of poison and other coloured glass bottles to produce powders of such delicate and attractive hues. The old lady seemed lost in thought for a moment, the rich memories bursting in her mind like forsythia buds on the first warm day of the year. Then her face became troubled at a thought to which the others had led, and which she felt it best to express thus. Then there was that shocking day when the engine driver stopped his train and threw pieces of track aggregate at you, an innocent child. Who could wonder if from that moment we dated your attitude towards authority? Such a thing could hardly fail to influence the pattern of a young child's future growth, could it? This is an example of the importance to them of geography. Who could guess such a start without knowing that we had once lived in a house so near the railway? The old lady paused for effect, made it, carried on. It was I who first told you the comic story of God, remember, which will no doubt be passed on to readers in due course. Christie's mother paused again. It was time to end while she was still at a fastigium, she thought, and so recommended. We fondly believe that there is going to be a reckoning, a day upon which all injustices are evened out, when what we have done will beyond doubt be seen to be right, when the light of our justification blazes forth upon the world. But we are wrong. Learn, then, that there is not going to be any day of reckoning, except possibly by accident. It seems that enough accidents happen for it to be a hope or even an expectation for most of us, the day of reckoning. But we shall die untidily, when we did not properly expect it, in a mess, most things unresolved, unreckoned, reflecting that it is all chaos. Even if we understand that all is chaos, the understanding itself represents a denial of chaos, and must therefore be an illusion. Christie's mother paused for the last time after this weighty and inelegant piece of dialectic, then concluded. My welcome is outstayed. I have lived as much of my life as I wish. It is simply time to go. We all have to go, though we have all been told so too many times. I cannot say I am really content. Who could? But I do accept. And even without opening the reserve stock of tinned goods, there is sufficient food to last you 2 or perhaps 3 days, if my death should cause you any loss of appetite. The house is yours. The money in my savings book will bury me decently, if decency is what you decide matters. The rest you must take in the state of chaos in which I found it, and in which I leave it. Christie's mother died.